The story begins with two forces that seem they would never meet. On one side are the knights, loyal masters of the sword. On the other are the ninjas, shadowy assassins who excel with shuriken. A young female knight never expected that these two forces existed right beside her. They were supposed to never meet. And this is the story of the strongest warrior, a never-before-seen existence combining two schools, the Night Ninja. Standing before a dungeon, Commander Ifuru, captain of the Kingdom of the Sun's 3rd Night Squad, declared that the monster-clearing mission was about to begin. This girl is Komi Sarah, in charge of training the rookies. Seeing one missing, Ifuru asked her about the recruit Nato. Sarah looked back to search but couldn't find him. Suddenly, Nato appeared right beside them, startling everyone. While the captain spoke seriously, he was absorbed in playing a game. That attitude irritated the other teammates. When asked what he was doing, Nato casually replied that he was playing a new puzzle game. The other knights began to bully Nato, saying he was too arrogant despite having joined only 6 months ago. They mocked him as an oddball from a distant eastern country. It turned out Nato came from an island nation called Japangu. He had barely passed the entrance exam and was seen as a strange, somewhat introverted recruit. Sarah intended to intervene, but Nato vanished before everyone's eyes. The two bullying teammates just glared at each other in annoyance, deeming Nato weak and troublesome. Putting the matter aside, the captain ordered the squad to enter the dungeon. The team formed ranks and carefully stepped deeper inside. Seeing Nato sneaking off to explore alone, Sarah worriedly asked about him. He answered briefly that he was fine, staring off to the side. The squad continued forward. Nato kept his distance, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Suddenly, a knight heard a dry click under his foot. He jumped in alarm. A trap had been triggered. The knight screamed in despair. Strangely, Nato had just stepped over that exact spot, but was unharmed. He explained it was due to his unique walking style, which only annoyed his comrades more. After the incident, the team grew more alert. Commander Ifuru reminded everyone to be extremely careful. Then the enemies appeared. 4 giant trolls blocked the squad's path. Commander Ifuru was stunned. He couldn't believe such a small dungeon housed 4 trolls. He immediately ordered everyone to prepare for battle. 2 frontline knights unleashed the skill Burst Wave to strike first. But the attack did nothing to the trolls. They easily smashed the formation, sending knights flying amid pitiful screams. A surviving knight watched in shock. With a single strike, almost her entire squad had been defeated. The trolls closed in on Sarah, the last survivor. Knowing there was no chance of victory, she decided to pour all her remaining strength into one final strike. Sarah shouted and unleashed the move /thrust with all her remaining power. A sort of light shot toward the trolls. They seemed surprised by the unexpected attack. However, despite their massive bodies, the trolls were surprisingly nimble. They easily leaped up and completely dodged Sarah's attack. Sarah was utterly stunned. The trolls landed and mocked that it was a fairly strong magical slash, but unfortunately it missed. Her last hope was shattered. A troll approached, and Sarah realized this was no ordinary monster. Having depleted her magic, she could only hold on with sword skills for about a minute. She turned and yelled for Nato, who lay on the ground, to flee quickly. Despite Nato's silence, Sarah remained poised, ready to face the monsters with everything she had. But then, an unexpected action occurred. Nato calmly took out a blowpipe, lit it, and blew something towards Sarah. Before she could understand what was happening, she felt something pierce her neck. It was a poison-coated needle. Nato coldly said she wouldn't regain consciousness for a while. Immediately, Sarah collapsed, unconscious. Now alone, Nato stood up. The drowsy, sluggish look vanished, replaced by deadly calm. He muttered that perhaps it was time to act. The trolls were surprised to see him still alive. Meanwhile, Nato thought silently that Sarah was a good person and he didn't want her to die. Even if his identity were exposed, he didn't care. Angry at being obstructed, all 4 trolls roared and charged at Nato. Contrary to Nato's expectations, Sarah remained conscious. Her body was suddenly paralyzed, but she forced herself up, She was terrified to see Nato facing 4 giant monsters alone. Just as the trolls swung their weapons, Nato suddenly vanished. Their attacks hit only empty air, leaving them baffled. From the ground, Sarah widened her eyes in astonishment. Where had he gone? The trolls looked around dazed, unable to find any trace of Nato. No sound, no trace. Nato had appeared directly behind a troll without it knowing. The trolls startled and turned around, unable to understand how he had moved unseen. Sarah was speechless at the sight. Nato unleashed the very slash-thrust skill Sarah had just used. But his speed and power were on an entirely different level. A single sword stroke sliced across all 4 trolls. The monsters roared, calling it a dirty tactic. The trolls fell silent. Their upper bodies slowly slid down, unable to believe what had happened. In an instant, all 4 giant monsters collapsed. Nato looked at his sword, an indescribable feeling rising within him. He admitted that the knights were amazing. After half a year of training, he realized their swordsmanship and magic skills had an offensive power a ninja like him couldn't match. Now, the problem was how to explain this to Sarah. He planned to lie that she had unconsciously unleashed another slash and defeated the trolls. He thought this plan would surely work. But the plan failed. Sarah was still conscious. She turned to him with suspicious eyes and asked a single question. Nato, who are you? Nato was deeply shocked. He couldn't understand why Sarah was still aware when that dose could fell a bear. Sarah explained she had been poisoned by monsters many times and had developed resistance. Nato silently cursed that she was as tough as a gorilla. Sarah continued to question how he could get behind the troll without being detected. Nato was even more shocked. He stammered, You saw me? He insisted he'd concealed his presence perfectly. Nato grabbed his head in confusion. This was the first time someone had detected him while using his stealth technique. He slipped and said he was a Jounin. Nato admitted Sarah wasn't ordinary, since she was the first to see through his stealth. Sarah pieced together the clues. Jounin, a spy from Japan. She stared at Nato and asked, Could it be that you are one of the ninjas? Sarah was horrified to realize she'd been teaching swordsmanship to a spy for 6 months. Nato made no attempt to hide it. He affirmed he was one of the village's 3 Jounin. He added that among them he was the best. This cold confession made Sarah aware of the danger she was in. The atmosphere grew tense. Sarah recognized the threat and bluntly asked if Nato intended to kill her. Nato hardened his expression, thinking that since his identity was exposed, to complete his mission he would have to eliminate the witness. He explained that ninjas undergo brutal mental training that allows them to do anything for their master. Though terrified, Sarah tightened her grip on her sword's hilt, ready to counterattack, believing someone like Nato could easily wipe them all out. But then Nato unexpectedly declared, But I will not kill you. Sarah was stunned, her eyes wide with surprise. He began to explain his reasons. For the past 6 months, Sarah had always been kind and had taught him. No matter where Nato tried to hide, she always found him. All his life, Nato had been trained to become a shadow, an invisible existence. No one had ever found him. Sarah was the first to do so. For the first time in his life, he felt his existence acknowledged. Even if that went against a ninja's righteousness, he did not want to kill her. He clutched his head in anguish, thinking himself shameful for not being ruthless enough for a ninja. Sarah asked what he intended to do now. Nato answered that there were 2 options. One was to be captured by the Night Order. The other was that Sarah would drink a sort of dulling drug to erase her memory. He even enthusiastically explained that the drug was made from poppy plants in the village. Sarah coldly replied she would never drink that. Nato admitted he was only joking. Immediately, Sarah stood and declared that as a knight, she would fight to the end to protect everyone. Nato hurried to explain that he had no intention of destroying the Night Order. His only goal was to retrieve the village manual, the Bansen Shuki. It was a scripture containing all kinds of ninjutsu, including forbidden techniques humanity should never use. He said that a year ago, a genius of illusion arts, formerly a Jounin, defected from the village and took that manual with him. Sarah wondered why he had to infiltrate the Night Order. Nato began to boast, saying that although the defector was a top ninja, his skills were still far inferior to Nato's. The real reason, according to intelligence, was that Commander Ifuru was trying to seize the Bansenshuki. Nato believed he was plotting to use the forbidden techniques for some evil plan. He could only say that one of those techniques was really, really bad. Sarah was stunned to hear this. Sarah began to piece it together. The kingdom had no recent wars, yet knights were constantly sent to conquer dangerous dungeons. Nato confirmed the real purpose wasn't slaying monsters, but searching dungeons for treasure, the hiding place of the Bansenshuki. Nato further explained that the defector, Kashin Koji, was an illusion specialist, essentially a sorcerer. He used magic to create a dungeon and hid it somewhere in this country. Nato's mission was to find the Bansenshuki before Commander Ifuru. Sarah recalled the unpleasant rumors about her commander and finally understood the true purpose behind the recent dangerous missions. After hearing the whole story, Sarah made a proposal. She would keep Nato's identity secret, and he would continue his work. She said his mission did not endanger the kingdom, and he had saved her life. It would violate a knight's creed not to repay a favor. In the name of God, she swore she would not reveal his secret. Nato immediately agreed, saying he knew how annoyingly honest knights could be. Sarah was a bit flustered, saying she only wanted to show her resolve. The two decided to cooperate. Sarah thanked Nato for saving her life. He then checked on the other knights and confirmed they were merely unconscious and did not require immediate treatment. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief. They returned to the trap wall that had separated them earlier. Nato inspected it and found the wall too thick to break. They were trapped. Nato reasoned there was only one way out: find the treasure chest at the dungeon's deepest point. Opening it would disable all the traps. At that moment, a new passage opened before them. They had no choice but to move forward. Nato said it was killing two birds with one stone, finding a way out while searching for the Bansenshuki. Along the way, Sarah curiously asked Nato about the stealth technique he had used. Nato explained it was the image concealment art, a technique to hide the body from others' sight, comprising many movement and hiding methods named after animals like martens, foxes, and quail. Moreover, ninjas must follow a strict diet to eliminate body odor and breath, avoiding foods like garlic and onions. Combined with all that, their presence would completely vanish. Nato explained further that it was a technique of coating the body with a thin layer of spirit energy, like rubbing on oil, to erase one's presence. Sarah understood spirit energy to be the kingdom's equivalent of magic, but she found the oil example disgusting. Even so, Sarah was very impressed. She admitted it was an astonishing technique, since ordinary people couldn't manipulate magic so intricately. She began to wonder who would be stronger in a fight between a knight and a ninja. Nato's answer surprised Sarah. He said that ninjas actually had no offensive skills. They only had techniques and tools for escape. Saying that, he tossed out a small smoke sphere as a demonstration. He explained that a ninja's work was intelligence, strategy, and assassination. The goal was to remain unseen, not to fight. In Japangu, those who specialize in direct combat are the samurai. Sarah was stunned. She couldn't believe someone with no offensive skills could master countless knightly sword techniques in just 6 months. A thought flashed through Sarah's mind. A ninja's purpose is to hide like a stalking cat. If you combine that with a knight's powerful swordsmanship, wouldn't you create an extremely formidable warrior? A ninja knight. They continued deeper into the dungeon. Nato pointed in one direction, but Sarah questioned it because it was clearly a dead end. While Sarah was about to find another route, Nato insisted the path was right there. He told her to step back a little. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out and the wall before them shattered. Sarah was pushed back by the blast. She panicked and asked what Nato had done. Had he used magic? Nato simply replied, no. He revealed he'd used a tool called a horikahia, a clay bomb filled with gunpowder. Sarah didn't even know what gunpowder was. Nato explained how to make it from simple ingredients. Nato added that gunpowder didn't exist on the continent, Only his island nation Japangu, with its ninja villages, had it. Sarah told him not to speak, as if he came from another world. The explosion opened a secret chamber. Nato explained he'd noticed the wall here was thinner and gave off a suspicious fishy smell, a familiar deception sign on ninja missions. Sarah was deeply impressed by his deductive ability. Sarah suddenly realized this meant Nato still had formidable offensive power thanks to his tools. Nato admitted he'd just wasted 4 precious Horakuhias. As they stepped into the chamber, a gigantic monster appeared before them. It was a dragon. Sarah was frozen with fear. A DRA dragon. In contrast, Nato remained very calm. He said he'd known it was here from when they entered the dungeon, sensing a strange scent like bamboo shoots. He told Sarah to fall back. Sarah panicked, saying a human couldn't possibly defeat a dragon alone. Nato confidently replied it was no problem, even though he was out of magic. Sarah doubted it. Had he ever slain a dragon before? Nato confessed this was the first time he'd seen a dragon. He explained that in Japanga their monsters are called spirits and look completely different. The dragon roared a thunderous roar and prepared to attack. Nato added that back home, creatures like this would be handled by the samurai. It breathed out an immensely powerful fireball. Nato, quick as lightning, grabbed Sarah and leapt aside, narrowly avoiding the attack. The blast left a deep, blackened crater in the ground. Sarah was horrified by the dragon's power and suggested they temporarily retreat to plan. But when she turned back, Nato had vanished without a trace. Sarah looked around in bewilderment, and then she saw an unbelievable sight. Nato was casually standing on one of the dragon's claws, and it had no idea. He was hiding right in the monster's blind spot, a mischievous smile on his lips. Sarah spotted him and silently warned him to stop smiling. Using the blind spot, Nato slid down the dragon's leg and delivered a slash thrust to its knee. Sarah happily thought he had succeeded by combining stealth technique and swordsmanship. But she was wrong. The slash did not cause any damage to the dragon's steel-hard scales. Nato was also stunned by its defense. Enraged, the dragon roared and swung its massive tail toward Nato. Sarah screamed in alarm to warn him. But Nato, with the speed of a ninja, easily moved around, dodging the dragon's storm of attacks. Sarah shouted for him to run, but Nato calmly replied that the scales were 8 times harder than he had imagined. Then he tossed Sarah a handheld game device and told her to play it to calm her nerves. Sarah could only scream that he was crazy. Nato unleashed the skill Burst Wave, but aimed it straight at the ground. The dragon mocked him, saying a skill that couldn't take down a troll could do nothing to it. Suddenly, the ground beneath the dragon exploded violently. It roared in surprise. Nato quickly pulled Sarah back and shielded her with his cloak. Sarah widened her eyes, not understanding what had just happened. Why did the ground explode? Nato explained it was another tool called an Izumabi. Essentially, it was a mine. He revealed that while dodging the dragon's tail strikes, he had secretly planted many mines around it. Sarah was aghast as she realized the whole plan. Nato had deliberately used Burst Wave on the ground to detonate all the mines at once. Once again, he had perfectly combined ninja and night techniques. The chain explosions completely destroyed the steel-hard scales under the dragon's belly, exposing a weak spot. It roared in pain. Sarah urgently shouted, warning him to watch below. Seizing the moment while the dragon was wounded and off guard, Nato took the opportunity and leapt into the air. He delivered one final slash, finishing the legendary dragon in a single strike. Sarah stood speechless, tears welling in her eyes. She couldn't believe Nato alone had defeated the dragon, something that would normally require an entire army. After the dragon was slain, they approached the treasure. Sarah wondered if this was the Bansen Shuki. Nato saw no sign of Kashin Koji. Sarah suggested using a sword to pry it open, but Nato said she didn't need a rush. Sarah couldn't believe Nato intended to pick the lock of such an ancient chest. She thought impossible. With a soft click, the chest opened. Nato explained he had used a kurakaji, a lockpick so simple a child could use it. Sarah was left speechless. Now she was completely convinced he truly was a ninja knight. After clearing the dungeon, Danzo Nato and Komi Sarah stand before the final treasure, the bodies of defeated monsters steaming around them. Nato announces he's opening the chest, while Sarah looks on with a hint of nervous anticipation. The chest opens to reveal a mound of glittering jewels and coins. Sarah gasps in awe, but Nato's face remains completely bored and unimpressed. It turns out the treasure wasn't the Bansen Shuki he was looking for. Nato expresses his disappointment, leaving Sarah confused about what he could have possibly wanted instead of a fortune. 2 days later, the scene shifts to the Sun Kingdom Knights barracks. Sarah makes her way down a long hallway before stopping to knock on Nato's door, calling out his name. She calls for him again, finding the silence strange. After telling him to hurry up, a faint yes finally comes from inside. Sarah questions why he's not outside since it's their day off, but Nato gives a roundabout answer about an emergency. Losing her patience, she yells at him to just open the door. Finally, Nato relents and lets her in. As she steps inside, Sarah grumbles to herself about how hard it is to deal with introverts. But what she sees inside stops her in her tracks. Nato is sitting on the floor, completely surrounded by towering stacks of books. Sarah is stunned, asking if he was born from books and games. She can't believe he read so many in just one day, but he calmly explains this is just his usual day-off activity. Suddenly, Nato's quiet demeanor vanishes. He launches into a passionate, high-speed explanation of the book he's reading, revealing a geeky side Sarah has never seen. She can only mutter that he's turned into a chatterbox. Sarah cuts him off, announcing that the vice commander of the Knights, Lord Shimura the Sword Saint, is here. It seems the report about a female knight, a troll, and a dwarf reached his ears, and he came to see Nato for himself. Sarah tells him to hurry up and get ready. As he stands, she notices how skinny he's become and asks with concern if he's eating properly. Nato explains that a ninja must weigh no more than 60 kilograms, as they often have to hang from ceilings using only their fingers. To Sarah's amazement, he demonstrates this with ease. He adds that since a knight's armor weighs 30 kilograms, he'd have to lose another 30 kilograms to compensate, an idea that makes Sarah plead with him to stop. Nato hangs there for a moment, pausing before he continues his explanation. Sarah looks up, waiting to hear what other strange facts he has to share. Sarah points out that he only has 12 magic power points, a very low number. But Nato casually corrects her, showing his arm and revealing he actually has 15, much to her surprise. An explanation of the world's magic system is shown. Magical power is represented by black dots, or magical marks, that appear on a person's body. A commoner has 0 to 2, while a knight can have from 5 to 50. Skills also require a minimum number of points to use. Nato then drops a bombshell. The marks on his arm are just a disguise painted on. He reveals his true power, a staggering 108 marks covering his entire arm, explaining he has to hide it because having that much magical power is unnatural. Even a legendary sword, Saint only has 50 marks. Sarah and Lord Shimura are both left speechless, thinking he's a monster. Nato, however, tries to awkwardly play it off as just really dark body hair. He explains the ninja power hierarchy, revealing that his 108 points give him the most magical power of any jonin in history. Realizing he's showing off again, he decides to go get changed. As he walks away, Sarah looks around the barren room. She finds it strangely lifeless and wonders where his armor could possibly be. Sarah's eyes land on a set of shelves, wondering if they double as a ladder. Nato confirms her suspicion by effortlessly lifting the entire unit, moving it aside to reveal the wall behind. But the surprises don't end there. Nato gets on his knees and pulls open a hidden hatch in the floorboards. The sight of a secret basement sends Sarah into a screaming shock. Sarah is still in shock, asking why there's a second floor. Nato calmly explains that he lives in hiding, and since ninjas are always being pursued, their homes must be filled with traps and secret passages. Nato then points out the ceiling, explaining that it's a suspended ceiling trap designed to fall and crush any intruders. Sarah realizes this is why the room felt strange earlier and yells at him not to kill people with his interior design. He's not done yet. He lifts the lid on a large crate, revealing it's not for storage, but a hidden escape route. Sarah can only sigh, remarking that he's really just doing whatever he wants. Finally dressed in armor, they head out. As they're leaving, a training sword suddenly springs up from a hidden compartment in the floor, narrowly missing Sarah. Nato had warned her to watch out, just a second too late. Sarah lets out a terrified scream, shouting "Ninja ah!" Nato, unfazed, simply explains the contraption is called a katana kakushi, a hidden sword device. A detailed floor plan reveals the true extent of Nato's modifications. His room is a fully fledged ninja base, complete with a suspended ceiling, a lookout hole, hidden stairs, an underground passage, and various other traps. The scene changes to the training grounds, where the knights are assembled. Sun Kingdom Knights Order Vice Commander Shimura stands before them, ready to begin the inspection. Shimura announces he will personally test their swordsmanship, forbidding the use of magic. The other knights are furious, complaining that the moron baldy geezer is ruining their precious day off. Without hesitation, Shimura calls out Sarah to be the first. He's heard the rumors about a gold sword knight defeating monsters and suspects she must be hiding some kind of trick. The knight ranking system is explained, a pyramid rising from bronze sword to the pinnacle, sword saint. Currently, there are only 2 sword masters in the kingdom, Commander Ifuru and Vice Commander Shimura himself. While Nato watches with his usual bored expression, Sarah is thrilled at the chance to be trained by the legendary sword saint. The two face off in the training yard, and the spar begins. Shimura immediately unleashes a storm of blows. His speed and power are on a completely different level, and Sarah is instantly overwhelmed. Sarah is slammed to the ground, gasping in pain from the sheer force of his attack. She struggles to get back on her feet as Shimura looks down on her, unimpressed, asking if that's all she has. Inwardly, Shimura breathes a sigh of relief. He'd been worried about the rumors, but now he's certain his title of Sword Saint is safe for a long time. Deciding to teach her a lesson, Shimura resolves to injure her slightly so she doesn't get too cocky. He moves in for another attack, aiming to put her in her place. But in a flash, Nato appears, planting himself between Sarah and Shimura's sword. He blocks the attack effortlessly, his sudden appearance shocking the other knights. Shimura is stunned. He can't believe Nato got so close without him even sensing his presence. He angrily demands to know what a rookie is doing, interrupting his match. With a deadpan expression, Nato introduces himself and brazenly asks to spar with the vice commander too. A grateful Sarah thanks him for the help, and Shimura agrees to the challenge. Nato tells Sarah he's just excited to see how much his own swordsmanship has improved. With that, he and Shimura take their positions in the center of the training yard. The two warriors stand ready, swords held high. Shimura tells the rookie to begin, and Nato calmly accepts. The onlookers mock Nato, saying a country boy like him is going to get himself killed. Shimura lunges forward, unleashing a powerful thrust meant to end the fight in an instant. In a blink, Shimura's sword is sent flying out of his hand. Nato stands there with a shocked expression, as if he can't believe what just happened. Shimura is bewildered, wondering if he imagined it. The other knights laugh, assuming it was a fluke. On the ground, Nato feigns a clumsy fall to complete the act. As Shimura dismissively calls for the next opponent, Nato, still on the ground, discreetly pulls out a ninja tool. He tosses a smoke bomb into the center of the yard, and it explodes in a massive cloud of smoke. The smoke instantly engulfs the area, blinding everyone. The knights panic, unable to see anything as Nato employs a classic ninja escape technique to create maximum confusion. As the smoke begins to clear, Shimura starts to walk away. Sarah, however, panics, pushing through the other knights, worried she's going to miss what happens next. But the match isn't over. Nato stands up, sword at the ready, and says, "Let's start over." Suddenly, Shimura feels a change in the air. He sees a strange, dark presence emanating from Nato, so thin he can almost see through him. The fight resumes in a blinding flash of steel. The two exchange blows at a speed that's almost impossible to follow. Shimura is shocked by the rookie's speed, but remains confident, thinking that it's nothing a sword saint like him can't handle. Nato's expression, however, remains calm and collected. Nato's movements become even more complex, creating multiple afterimages of himself that begin to overwhelm Shimura's defenses. Shimura starts to sweat, his eyes wide with disbelief. He can't understand what he's seeing. Panic sets in. The Sword Saint is completely bewildered by Nato's impossible speed. From the sidelines, Sarah watches in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what's happening. The secret to this power lies in the hellish training ninjas endure from childhood. Exercises like the light body, Tengu Ascend, and a ninja run push their physical abilities to superhuman levels. In an instant, Nato appears directly behind Shimura. The Sword Saint is completely oblivious until he sees Nato's chilling reflection in his own sword, and his confident boast dies in his throat. Sarah screams out a desperate warning. Shimura, behind you. But it's too late. The vice commander is frozen in place, paralyzed by pure terror. Shimura slowly turns his head, his face pale with fear, only to find Nato standing right there, his expression unreadable. Just as the other knights spot them through the dissipating smoke, the scene changes. Nato is no longer behind Shimura, but instead on the ground. With perfect timing, Nato fakes another clumsy fall. Shimura swings his sword through the empty air where Nato had been just a moment before. The other knights erupt in laughter, mocking the rookie for losing so pathetically. Nato thinks to himself that since magic was banned, the Sword Saint would have instantly noticed even the smallest trace of his ninja abilities. Sarah stares in disbelief, her mind racing. To be on even ground with the Sword Saint, she can't comprehend it, wondering just who Nato really is. Shimura is also shaken, realizing this rookie is no ordinary knight and could be dangerous. Nato, however, simply thinks that his physical abilities manage to cover for his lack of swordsmanship. To defuse the situation, Nato approaches Shimura and offers him a drink as thanks for the match. Shimura, distracted and thinking he needs to report this, accepts and takes a sip. The effect is instant and bizarre. Shimura's face goes slack, and he looks around with a goofy, confused expression, asking, "Who are you?" As Nato cheerfully introduces himself again, Sarah asks what on earth he did. Nato calmly explains that he spiked the commander's drink with a strong mornization drug because it would be a pain if he drew too much attention. Sarah can only tell him he shouldn't use it so much. With the vice commander now under his control, Nato seizes the opportunity. He asks if Shimura could make the Northwest Tower their next dungeon expedition, and the day's commander happily agrees. When Sarah asks why he chose that specific tower, Nato looks back to the memory of the treasure chest. He explains he detected the faint, lingering scent of Kashin Koji, a smell like acorns, in the dragon's dungeon. Sarah realizes this must mean the dungeon belonged to Kashin Koji. Nato clarifies that the scent was faint, suggesting he only passed through. He also reveals that, for some reason, he's the only one who could detect this unique smell. Nato pulls out a map, showing that he's detected traces of the scent in every dungeon he's explored. The trail gets stronger as he moves northwest, leading him to believe his target is heading for the Northwest Dungeon. And so, the knights ride out towards their new destination. The others complain about another monster subjugation mission and the surprisingly cold weather in the Northwest region. One knight grumbles that they have no choice since it's Lord Shimura's order. The now childlike commander floats happily beside them. Nearby, Sarah scolds Nato for playing a game on his horse, just as something up ahead catches her eye. As they approach their destination, Nato comments on the incredible fog. Sarah explains that it's always thickest around the tower, which is why it's called the Tower of Fog. Seeing him unfazed by the cold, she asks if his resistance is also the result of some special ninja training. Nato just gives her a creepy, wide-eyed smile and says nothing, leaving her to wonder. In the background, a group of other adventurers watch the knights pass by. A trio of rough-looking adventurers approaches them. Their leader warns them that many under-equipped adventurers have been going missing lately after being killed by monsters, and he tells them not to overdo it. One of the other knights tells them to shut up, but the adventurers get angry, accusing the knights of just being there to steal treasure while pretending to fight monsters. The adventurer points at Nato, saying he especially won't take orders from a skinny, game-playing guy. Nato, completely absorbed in his puzzle game, just apologizes that he can't seem to clear the level. The adventurers scoff and head into the tower. Nato, still focused on his game, quietly hopes they might find the Bansen Shuki for him. Sarah adds that it doesn't matter, since they won't be strong enough to reach the deepest floor anyway. The knights follow, entering the massive stone tower. The leader announces that the exploration is now officially underway, setting the stage for the challenges that lie within. A mysterious voice calls out, revealing its presence to the group. Inside the dense fog, the knights struggle to see, with one of them noting that this fog is not normal and makes it difficult to sense anything. Suddenly, Danzo Nato picks up a scent. One of his teammates asks if he smells something again, and Nato confirms, identifying a strong smell of shimeji mushrooms. Hearing this, Komi Sarah panics. She realizes that a strong scent must mean a powerful monster is nearby and worries that it might be a dragon-class threat. As a hand points forward, 5 terrifying, skeletal figures in dark hoods emerge from the thick mist, their empty eye sockets staring menacingly at the group. The knights identify the creatures as wraiths. Without a moment's hesitation, Nato leaps into action, charging forward and swinging his sword at the nearest ghost. However, his blade passes straight through the creature, as if it were air. The wraith lets out a screech, completely unharmed by the physical attack. His teammates yell out a warning as another wraith appears directly in front of Nato, unleashing a barrage of sharp, shadowy tendrils to strike him down. But Nato has already vanished, reappearing behind the wraith with a smug expression, leaving the monster utterly confused about where its target went. Sarah scolds him for simply dodging, while the burly knight is overcome with fear, letting out a terrified scream as a wraith looms over him. As the manzel begins to break from sheer terror, he fumbles for a potion. Sarah shouts at her teammates, trying to get them to pull themselves together. Stepping up, Sarah leaps towards the wraiths, unleashing her line-slash technique in a powerful, sweeping attack against the ghostly figures. Realizing her attack didn't work, she calls out to Nato, telling him to bring out the holy water. As soon as the water is used, the wraiths begin to burn and dissolve. Nato coats his sword in holy water and with a single, swift motion, cuts down a wraith. He lets out a sigh, admitting that the fight was a bit of a challenge. With the wraiths defeated, the party takes a moment to breathe. Sarah observes that the damp and foggy tower is the perfect environment for spirits to thrive. The party begins to ascend the tower stairs. The burly knight warns everyone to conserve their holy water, as they're likely to encounter more enemies further in. As they climb higher, the fog continues to grow thicker, making it harder to see. Nato remains silent, his expression unreadable as always. Without warning, Nato grabs Sarah's hand. Startled by the sudden contact, she lets out a small yelp of surprise. The other knights notice this, their expressions showing a mix of shock and disapproval. Nato then casually leans against Sarah as they walk, much to his comrades' bewilderment. Sarah asks him what he's doing. Nato calmly explains that because of the thick fog, they're more likely to get lost if they are alone, so they should stick together to find the treasure. Sarah is stunned, realizing she can feel a slimy magic coming from Nato's hand. He clarifies that he's applied a thin layer of magic over both their bodies to act as a camouflage, which can be shared through touch. Nato explains this is one of the ninja's secret techniques, called moonwalking. He mentions its camouflage effect is weaker when shared, but they need to hurry before the others catch up. After dealing with a large number of wraiths, Sarah wonders how much holy water they have left. As they take a break, Nato notes the fog is still getting thicker and offers her a snack. Noticing their supplies are low and the environment is getting colder, Nato pulls out a strange, cylindrical object from his pouch and offers it to her. Sarah cautiously takes the object, her eyes widening in surprise as she feels a pleasant warmth radiating from it. She asks what it is, amazed by the sudden heat. Nato explains that it's a ninja tool for starting fires called a dubi. Sarah looks at it with fascination, amazed that it can create heat without needing any flint to work. Nato further explains that the dubi can last for 12 hours, making it a handy pocket warmer. Sarah is amazed by the ninja tool's utility, which brings a slight smile to Nato's face. Sarah thanks him, but her gratitude quickly turns to annoyance when Nato proudly shows off a puzzle game he was solving while his hands were numb. She scolds him for prioritizing a game over a girl, calling him a typical introvert. Their bickering is cut short when they stumble upon two large treasure chests. Seeing the potential loot, Sarah's eyes light up with excitement. Having finally reached what looks like the treasure room, Nato and Sarah stand triumphantly before their prize, ready to see what rewards their perilous journey has yielded. As they approach, Sarah notes that there must be a lot of adventurers aiming for this treasure. Nato remains silent, his expression as unreadable as ever. Nato checks the first chest, finding it unlocked. He lifts the lid to reveal a trove of gold, silver, and sparkling jewels, leaving both of them momentarily stunned by the amazing sight. Excited by their find, Sarah immediately turns her attention to the second chest, eagerly reaching out to open it and see what other treasures await. But as the lid flies open, a grotesque, crab-like monster with razor-sharp teeth bursts out, revealing the chest to be a deadly trap. Sarah lets out a terrified scream, instantly recognizing the creature as a mimic, a classic dungeon monster known for ambushing greedy adventurers. Before the mimic can even attack, Nato is already behind it, his hands on the lid. Sarah watches in shock, completely bewildered as to how he moved so quickly. Just as the monster is about to pounce, Nato slams the lid shut. He then pulls out another one of his ninja gadgets, a uniquely shaped tool he calls the Kuroro key. He calmly inserts the key into the mimic's lock and turns it, trapping the creature inside. With the threat neutralized, Sarah sits down, relieved and grateful. Nato explains that he suspected it was a monster because of the bad smell, and reveals that a single Kuroro key is all it takes to defeat a mimic, much to Sarah's astonishment. Sarah complains that he should have warned her if he knew. Nato cheekily apologizes, saying he couldn't get a word in because her desire for treasure was practically overflowing. They decide to leave the loot for the captains, and Sarah asks if the real treasure is still up ahead. However, her question just seems to confuse Nato. Leaving the trapped mimic behind, they press on, only for Sarah to realize they've circled back to the same spot. She exclaims that they're lost, and Nato grimly agrees that the thick fog has made this dungeon harder than expected. Sarah is clearly exhausted and out of breath, but she insists she's fine. Nato suggests they rest, pointing out that they can't ignore the strange rumbling sound they keep hearing. To help her regain her strength, Nato offers her a handful of small, round pellets, which he calls provision balls. Sarah is skeptical, questioning what the sticky, unappetizing things are. Nato explains that it's the ninja's portable preserved food. Hesitantly, she takes one, thinking it looks kind of scary. After trying one, she's surprised that it's both sweet and tasty. Nato explains that they're made with various medicinal herbs, sugar, and ginseng to relieve fatigue and pain. Feeling her energy return, Sarah remarks that the tower dungeon must be tough even for a high-level ninja. Nato just quietly munches on the provision balls himself. Suddenly, Nato chokes, realizing he ate the wrong pill. He explains that he accidentally ate a green thirst pill instead of a brown provision ball, while Sarah just tells him to be quiet for a bit. After their short break, they prepare to move again, hoping they can find the stairs without getting lost. Nato then asks Sarah for the bronze fire tool back and pulls out a needle, piquing her curiosity. Nato places the needle onto a leaf and floats it in a small puddle of water. He's creating a simple, makeshift compass to guide them through the disorienting fog. After a moment, the leaf begins to spin in the water before pointing in a single direction. Sarah is shocked that it moved, wondering aloud if Nato is performing some kind of fortune-telling ritual. Nato matter-of-factly calls it a ninja method for finding directions. Flustered, Sarah tells him not to act like it's common knowledge. He confirms their direction is north, and they set off once more. He explains the principle of thermoremanent magnetization, a phenomenon passed down among ninjas that even their children know. Annoyed, Sarah tells him to stop boasting. Now able to navigate, they easily fight their way through the remaining wraiths, finally clearing the path to the top of the tower. Panting and exhausted from the long climb, the two knights finally step onto the last floor, relieved to have made it. They proceed down a long, empty hall, their footsteps echoing through the cold, misty air as they approach the final chamber. Reaching the end, they find 2 rooms. Sarah is relieved that their main group hasn't caught up yet. But as they peer inside one of the rooms, their expressions turn to shock. Sitting on a throne of ice is a colossal, muscular old man with a beard made of sharp icicles. The sheer pressure radiating from him confirms he is the master of this tower. While Nato blankly describes him as a huge old guy, Sarah panics, identifying the boss as a frost giant, the true source of the powerful mist filling the dungeon. Nato realizes the mist wasn't a sign of Kashin Koji after all. Still, he detects a faint, familiar scent, confirming his target was here. They decide to check the other room before fighting the giant. When they look into the second room, they're greeted by a horrifying sight, a seemingly endless horde of wraiths, packed together like a massive, skeletal army. Behind a barred window, they spot the adventurers they encountered earlier, now prisoners. Sarah immediately recognizes them, horrified by the sheer number of monsters guarding them. Sarah quickly deduces the wraiths are gathered here to stay near the frost giant's cold air and to watch over the captured humans. But Nato wonders why the adventurers were captured in the first place. Sarah suggests they might be food, but Nato points out that for the huge number of monsters, there are far too few humans to serve as a meal. The strange situation leads Nato to ponder a deeper question, asking aloud, what exactly is a dungeon? Sarah explains the common understanding. A dungeon is a monster's home, likely created by a magician who uses treasure to lure humans inside. Nato listens intently, thinking that a better understanding of dungeons might reveal why Kashin Koji created one. Sarah remarks that only someone from the East would ask such a philosophical question. Putting the questions aside, Nato brings up a more immediate issue. Sarah suddenly realizes the problem. She's completely out of holy water, having used the last of it on their way up. She begins to panic, realizing they can't save the adventurers without it. As a knight, she can't just abandon them. But Nato remains perfectly calm, simply saying, it's fine. He then lays out his plan. He will use a concealment technique to sneak through the army of wraiths and rescue the adventurers without ever being noticed. Sarah is stunned that he can talk about such a dangerous mission so casually. She insists on fighting the frost giant with him, but he explains they have to rescue the prisoners first to avoid complications. He reluctantly agrees to let her help, but his tone makes it clear he's not counting on her at all. Frustrated, Sarah insists that she's still a knight and will absolutely be of help. With the plan decided, Nato activates his skill. Announcing that he'll rescue the adventurers first, he confidently walks into the room, disappearing among the horde of wraiths. As Nato stepped through the dungeon, he checked the gauge on his arm, knowing he needed to keep an eye on his remaining magic power. He walked into a room teeming with wraiths, but instead of fear, his face showed only his usual look of utter boredom. Watching from a monitor, Komi Sarah couldn't hide her anxiety. The sheer number of wraiths was enough to make anyone nervous. But Nato moved through the crowd of spirits as if they were nothing, even casually leaning on one like an old friend. Sora's patience snapped. Seeing him fool around while his magic drained away, she yelled through the speaker for him to stop messing around and get on with it. Finally reaching the prison cells, Nato approached the captured adventurers, offering them a drink to replenish their strength. One of the men looked up, confused by the sudden appearance of this knight who seemed completely unfazed by the surrounding danger. Without warning, Nato struck the man, telling him to be quiet. The sudden action left the other prisoners wide-eyed in shock. The man, overwhelmed with relief, grabbed Nato's hand, thanking him over and over. Nato simply told him he was here to rescue them. With a firm grip, he pulled the man along, leading the bewildered adventurers out of their cell. The men were baffled by the strange, oily magic power flowing from Nato's hand. He calmly explained that this power would make them invisible to the wraiths. They walked right through the horde of spirits, completely unnoticed. The adventurers trembled in fear, while one of them whispered a nonsensical comment about being a four-leaf clover. Nato just shushed them and kept moving. Sarah watched them navigate the dangerous path, celebrating their success, but also urging them to hurry up and stop walking so slowly. Nato's magic continued to flow into the adventurers, but the gauge on his arm showed it was depleting at an alarming rate. Sarah realized the problem. Even with 108 points, using his magic to shield 3 other people was draining his reserves incredibly fast. She worried if he'd have enough to get them all out safely. Meanwhile, Sarah stood guard before a massive, frozen door. The temperature was dropping so rapidly that her own armor was beginning to freeze solid. She knew the frost giant was just on the other side. She reached for her supplies, only to find she was out of torches. Her face paled as she realized she had no way to create fire to fight the giant. Suddenly, a torch clattered on the ground in front of her. The door creaked open, revealing the dungeon's boss. The fearsome frost giant glared out, and the nearby wraiths stirred in its presence. As the giant's foot stepped into the room, Sarah's face filled with despair. She was completely screwed. Beside her, Nato watched the scene unfold with his typical lack of emotion. The frost giant emerged, far larger than she had imagined. It seemed surprised to see a lone knight this deep in the dungeon, and, cracking its knuckles, declared its intention to fight her. Gritting her teeth, Sarah drew her sword. She decided it was her responsibility to defeat this monster alone and hold out until Nato returned with the others. Back in the main hall, the wraiths began to stir, sensing the disturbance from the boss room. The sound of Sarah's battle echoed through the dungeon, causing the wraiths to stir. Nato and the adventurers realized the commotion was drawing unwanted attention, and things were about to get much worse. Nato found himself in a dilemma. If he went to rescue Sarah from the frost giant, the adventurers would be left alone and defenseless. But without holy water, they had no way to fight back against the approaching wraiths. He had to make a choice, and fast. Sarah charged forward, but the frost giant slammed its fist into the ground, sending a shockwave of ice that knocked her off her feet. She quickly recovered, launching her own line-slash attack, but the giant simply raised an arm, creating an ice wall that blocked her strike completely. To her horror, the giant shattered her sword technique with a single, contemptuous punch. It then threw a punch that missed her but obliterated the wall right behind, the force of the blow sending her flying. The giant mocked her, wondering why she was so weak for someone who had made it this far. Sarah coughed up blood, realizing in despair that her attacks hadn't even left a scratch. Looking at her arm, she saw she only had 6 magic points left. With no other choice, she decided to bet everything on one final technique. But the frost giant was growing impatient, roaring for her to entertain it more as it charged forward. With a determined cry, Sarah unleashed her ultimate move, creating multiple afterimages of herself to strike the giant from all sides. Using all 6 of her remaining magic points, she executed a powerful rolling slash, spinning like a discus as she flew towards the giant's head. The attack landed. For a moment, she thought she had done it, but her celebration was cut short. Her strongest technique had only left a small cut. The giant, now furious that she had dared to wound it, began to gather chilling energy in its hand. "This is the end," the giant declared. It unleashed a wave of frost that shot across the floor, trapping Sarah's feet in solid ice. Back with NATO, the adventurers were panicking as the wraiths closed in. But NATO suddenly remembered something and came to a decision. He told one of the men to hold his shoulder and produced a strange, dumpling-like item. The man asked what it was, and NATO called it a sukitsugen, or a thirst pill. Without another word, NATO began smearing the pasty substance from the pill all over his sword blade. The adventurer watched in disbelief, thinking the knight had lost his mind from fear. But NATO explained that the pickled plum in the pill contained a massive amount of salt. He then revealed a secret from his homeland, Zipangu. To fight spirits, they don't use holy water, they use salt. Holding his salt-covered sword aloft, he prepared a combination technique, blending his stealth skills with the power of the thirst pill. With the adventurers huddled behind him, NATO unleashed a massive line slash, a single, sweeping strike that cut across the entire room. The attack sliced through every single wraith, separating their upper bodies from their lower halves in one clean motion. And just like that, the entire horde of spirits evaporated into dust. The rescued men were speechless. They couldn't believe he had just defeated 100 spirits using food. NATO simply noted that the salt had worked. With the immediate threat gone, he told the men to wait there. The adventurers, now in complete awe, could only call him amazing as he walked away. NATO arrived at the boss room to find a grim scene. Sarah was completely encased in a pillar of ice, helpless before the towering frost giant. But instead of charging in heroically, NATO just started laughing, telling Sarah she looked like a sculpture. From inside the ice, Sarah fumed, yelling that this was no time to be cracking jokes, while the giant looked on, surprised by the newcomer. Trapped in the ice, Sarah yelled at NATO, warning him that he only had 6 magic points left and that her strongest attack had barely worked. She was terrified he was just strolling to his death. NATO just calmly replied, "It's fine," and asked to borrow her copper fire starter. Sarah insisted it was impossible and begged him to run as the giant launched another freezing attack. Sarah recognized the box he pulled out. It was the same ninja tool he used against the dragon. NATO placed it on the ground and began preparing his own technique. He unleashed a rolling slash, but this one was different. Using a fire combination technique, he ignited the very air around his strike. The attack transformed into a fiery chariot, a spinning vortex of flame that slammed directly into the frost giant. The giant couldn't even react. It could only mutter impossible as its entire body was instantly vaporized by the intense heat. As the giant melted away, NATO coolly observed that, as expected, ninja fire techniques work well against ice monsters. With a deadpan expression, he declared, "It's over." Sarah's mind completely broke. After she had struggled so desperately, he took the boss down in a single, instantaneous attack. As the ice around her melted, NATO explained that the peppermint oil from the thirst pill he'd smeared on his blade made the fire burn even hotter. Sarah could only stare, still trying to process what he'd just done. NATO urged her to get moving before the wraiths noticed them. Sarah was now genuinely terrified of him, stammering as she asked what on earth he was. They quickly made their way to the treasure room, needing to check the contents before any other knights arrived and started asking questions. They opened the chest to find it overflowing with gold, silver, and jewels. A massive haul. But the one thing they were looking for, the Bansen Shuki, wasn't there. NATO sighed in disappointment, while the rescued adventurers began to hero worship him, deciding to call him Big Bro. NATO immediately shut that down, threatening them not to tell anyone what happened. He offered them a choice: keep quiet, or he could break their brains with a memory-erasing drug. They quickly agreed to silence. Sarah was dejected that they'd hit another dead end. One of the rescued men, noticing NATO's black hair, correctly guessed he was from the eastern country. This sparked a memory. The man explained that before they arrived, the prison was full of other adventurers, but a man who also looked like he was from the east came and took them all away. The man said that person, though human, was talking with monsters. NATO did a quick, goofy impression of the described man, and the adventurer confirmed it was him. Sarah commented that he was oddly good at it. They realized they must have just missed their target, Kashin Koji. When asked where the man went, the adventurer pointed out the prison window towards a carriage leaving in the distance. Sarah checked her map. The man wasn't heading northwest as they'd assumed, but west. Nato's eyes narrowed. He realized that Kashin Koji's own personal dungeon must be in that direction. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon in Seoul Village, a knight commander announced their plans. They would rest for 2 days before heading to their next mission, a dungeon 60 kilometers to the north. As they emerged from the Mist Tower, Sarah celebrated their success and suggested they use the 2-day break to investigate the western dungeon they'd just learned about. But she noticed Nato wasn't listening. He was staring intently at something in the distance. A group of heavily armored knights rode into the village. Their leader was an imposing man with long blonde hair, a goatee, and a severe expression. Sarah was shocked. It was Captain Ifuru of the first squad. She'd never seen him up close before and was overwhelmed by his powerful aura. Nato, however, just wondered why someone of his rank was all the way out here. Captain Ifuru questioned his vice-captain, Shimura, about why the first squad was there. Shimura explained that one of their members had been petrified by a cockatrice, and they stopped in the village to have the curse removed at the blacksmith's. As Shimura looked over, his eyes met Nato's. He suddenly felt his head go hazy, wondering who this rookie knight was. Nato recalled his earlier threat to the adventurers as Sarah warned him not to push his luck. The other knights were just excited to see their famous captain. Nato's eyes widened in a ridiculously exaggerated expression of shock as he saw the ornate sword at Captain Ifuru's hip. Sarah was baffled by his over-the-top reaction, noting how beautiful the weapon was. She explained that about 400 years ago, the king gave that sword to the hero as proof of defeating the demon lord. Captain Ifuru, she added, is the 17th generation descendant of that very hero. Still keeping up his act, Nato looked utterly flabbergasted, as if he'd never even heard of a demon lord. Sarah couldn't believe his ignorance, finding it impossible that he could be so clueless about their country's history. Nato thought back to his homeland of Zipangu. They had practiced total isolation for centuries. When foreigners tried to force their borders open 70 years ago, the samurai slaughtered them all, reinforcing their closed-off society. This was why their history was a blind spot for him. Switching back to his bubbly rookie persona, he gushed over how good Sarah's explanations were, eagerly asking her to continue. She went on to describe the First Demon Lord War, which happened 900 years ago when the Demon Lord Bathala suddenly appeared and attempted to destroy the world. Humanity was nearly annihilated, but for some unknown reason, the Demon Lord suddenly vanished. This event became known as the Miracle of Mankind. Still acting, Nato pressed for more details, finding her storytelling completely captivating. Sarah, a little flustered, agreed to continue. She explained that 500 years later, the Demon Lord Bathala returned, starting the Second Demon Lord War. Humanity was on the back foot during a fierce battle that lasted for 8 long years. But then, a knight from their own Sun Kingdom, Chelevek Ifuru, finally managed to slay the Demon Lord, becoming the world's hero. Nato pretended to be disappointed that the story was over. When Sarah questioned his tone, he dropped the act completely, stating that, of course, he already knew all of this. He always researches the necessary intel before any mission. He revealed his act was a ninja skill called the Technique of the 5 Emotions, a form of flattery used to put someone at ease and extract information. Sarah was left speechless, realizing he'd been manipulating her the entire time. His expression turned serious as he watched Captain Ifuru from a distance, wondering what the man was planning to do with the forbidden arts of the Bansenshuki. To Sarah's surprise, Captain Ifuru started walking their way. He addressed her by name, saying he'd heard from her squad leader about her defeating both a troll dragon and a frost giant. Sarah was flustered, shocked that the famous captain would speak directly to a low-rank knight like her. But then Ifuru's eyes took on a sharp, unsettling glint as he asked if she had opened the frost giant's treasure chest yet. Sarah realized he wasn't interested in her at all, but in the chest behind her. Ifuru then turned his gaze to Nato, asking if they had met somewhere before. Shimura quickly introduced Nato as a rookie who had joined 6 months ago. Ifuru accepted this, and Nato confirmed it was their first time meeting. Ifuru dismissed the feeling of familiarity as his imagination. Internally, Nato was panicking, insisting to himself that there was no way an elite jounin like him could have been noticed while monitoring the captain. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble violently. As his knights panicked, wondering if it was an earthquake, Ifuru remained calm and simply ordered them to break the lock on the treasure chest. A massive, monstrous serpent burst from the ground, its sudden appearance stunning everyone into silence. The knights cried out in terror, recognizing the superclass monster as a basilisk. It let out a hiss, revealing it was the female of the species, here to avenge the cockatrice that Ifuru's squad had killed in the dungeon. The basilisk's eyes locked onto Ifuru. It had heard from the other dungeon monsters about the one who carried the hero's sword. It was here to settle the 400-year-old grudge against the hero's descendant, once and for all. One of the commanders realized the gravity of their situation. Even with the first and third squads combined, their chances of winning were slim. He roared for everyone to prepare for battle. The basilisk immediately lashed out with a spray of venom, taking down 2 knights instantly. As the battlefield fell into chaos, Nato decided he couldn't risk revealing his true strength, resolving instead to focus on protecting Sarah. But Sarah was already charging forward, preparing to bet all her magic on a single powerful strike. The basilisk's eyes locked onto Ifuru as it roared, "Die, descendant of a hero," creating an opening that Sarah rushed to exploit. As the basilisk lunged, Captain Ifuru did the unthinkable. He kicked the body of a fallen comrade directly into the monster's path, using him as a human shield. Seraster inuteroror. Nato, however, was unfazed, noting that Ifuru used the corpse as a shield without a moment's hesitation. Ifuru simply scoffed at the monster's pathetic trick. His eyes then darted to the side. The basilisk's tail was swinging towards the frost giant's treasure chest. He knew he couldn't let it be destroyed, not if there was a chance it contained the Bansen-shuki. With a powerful kick, he sent the heavy chest flying out of the tail's path just in the nick of time. The move left everyone, including the basilisk, completely stunned. Nato's deadpan expression didn't change, but Sarah's face was a mask of disbelief and disgust. His men cried out his name in concern, but Ifuru now stood alone, facing the massive beast. The basilisk laughed, thinking the fight was over. But Ifuru was just getting started. He declared he would use all of his magic, raised his glowing sword, and ordered his men to fall back. He unleashed his ultimate move, the Crescent Brave Slash, sending a massive wave of energy hurtling towards the monster. The watching knights could only stare in wide-eyed shock as the attack connected, the basilisk frozen in disbelief. In an instant, the monster was sliced clean in two, its body disintegrating into dust. Ifuru watched with a cold, satisfied smirk. His men were ecstatic, unable to believe he had taken down the Snake King Basilisk in a single blow. It was his ultimate move, a technique only he could use. One of the senior knights theatrically explained the move's power. It could only be performed with the legendary hero's sword, which never chipped and amplified magic. It took years of training and a shocking amount of magic to use. It was a skill beyond any normal human. Nato watched the captain, his gaze fixed on the blood dripping from Ifuru's leg. He wondered what kind of man would go to such lengths just to obtain the Bansen-shuki. Nato suddenly felt a shiver run down his spine, a sense of unease that he couldn't quite place. The knights rushed to Ifuru's side, seeing the venom wound on his leg. They urged him to get treatment and take an antidote right away. Ifuru just laughed it off. "Don't mind it," he said. "As always, it'll heal quickly." He attributed his rapid healing to his hero's blood. But the true cost of his victory was revealed. His attack had not only killed the basilisk, but it had also carved a massive chasm straight through the village, destroying homes in its path. A mother and her child were left standing on the edge of the abyss where their house once stood. Sira's face twisted in pure rage. He had attacked without any hesitation, not caring about the villagers caught in the crossfire. Absolutely unforgivable, she seethed. I hate him. Nato had to warn her to control her expression. Ifuru finally opened the treasure chest, but his face soured when he saw it was only filled with gold. He slammed the lid shut in annoyance. He then strolled over to the displaced mother and child, casually tossing the chest at their feet. Sorry for destroying your house, he said without a hint of real remorse. Here, rebuild it with this. The mother, stunned but grateful, thanked him profusely. As if remembering an afterthought, he turned to the bodies of his fallen men. His remaining soldiers knelt as he offered a brief, hollow prayer, saying their courage would be remembered for eternity. Sarah was livid, calling it a cheap, slapped-on prayer. I hate him, she repeated, her face a mask of fury. Nato dryly told her that her angry face was showing again. Later that evening, back at their inn, they finally had a moment to process the day's events. Sarah sighed, exhausted, while Nato commented that he never expected Captain Ifuru to show up. Seeing her disgust with the captain's actions, Nato decided to reveal his true purpose. He explained that the entire reason he infiltrated the Knights was to monitor Ifuru and to recover the Bansen Shuki before he did, or steal it, if the captain already had it. He continued, explaining that based on Ifuru's desperate actions to protect the treasure chest, he was certain the captain hadn't obtained the Bansen Shuki yet. With a look of pure disgust, Sarah declared that her feelings for the captain had gone from dislike to absolute hatred. She vowed never to forgive him for treating his comrades and the villagers like insects. She told Nato she would get ready to go with him, but he told her to wait. Nato told her that he was going alone. It was his mission, and there was no need for her to risk her life. He even added that he could move faster by himself. But her knightly spirit had been ignited. Clenching her fist, she yelled that of course she was going too, promising she would be of help. She was determined to never let a man like that get his hands on the Bansen Shuki. Seeing her unshakable resolve, Nato reluctantly agreed with a comically pouty face. Sarah noted with some satisfaction that even a ninja's poker face could crack when they hated something that much. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, Captain Ifuru was quietly reading in his room when he heard a knock on the door. A strange symbol glowed on the outside of the door. Without looking up from his book, Ifuru simply said, "Enter." 3 mysterious figures in dark, hooded cloaks silently entered his room. One of the figures addressed him as Lord Ifuru, reporting that they had successfully located Kashin Koji's dungeon. Ifuru's eyes widened in surprise. A sinister smile spread across his face. "You've done well," he said, standing up. "At last." Pointing forward with a look of triumph, he declared that the forbidden art of the Bansen Shuki, the soul transfer technique, would finally be his. He handed a small, rolled-up scroll to one of his cloaked agents, telling him to take it with him on his mission. Out in the forest, Nato and Sarah prepared for their journey, unaware that they were already being watched by Ifuru's spies, who were counting on them to lead the way. The race to find a Bansen Shuki had officially begun.